Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Adriana was married to Michael. For 5 years, they had lived in a private home with Michael's parents and had made a separate entrance in one half of the house. Adriana had a daughter from her first marriage. The girl studied at a technical school in another city and came to her mother on weekends. In a joint marriage, Adriana gave Michael a daughter. And now they were expecting a son. The couple would have been quite happy if not for the mother-in-law. She drove her daughter-in-law out of the light, and if not directly in the face, did not say nasty things, then looked unkindly. And she was always unhappy with everything. What Adriana would not make everything bad. The daughter-in-law tried to meet her as little as possible, but when you live near her, it is quite difficult to do so. Adriana went out into the yard where she had flowers growing. She had planted them herself, watered them, tended them. The flower was very beautiful along the edge of roses, fragrant, white, and in the center of the bright balls were bushes of white, yellow, and burgundy dwarf chrysanthemums. Completed the composition, and in the fall flowers. Indian summer, Adriana also had bushes of peonies. A bed with tulips all required care and watering. Adriana loved messing around with the plants and the soil. It was as if she felt they were saying something. Now the chrysanthemums are thirsty. They need watering. Her husband made fun of her for it. So Adriana preferred not to let him in on her conversations with the flowers. She listened and got an answer. She did what she thought the flowers wanted her to do. Michael worked as a truck driver. He often had long trips. From his business trips, he brought his girls many different gifts and sweets. The eldest called him Daddy and always obeyed him. Today, Michael had to return from another business trip. It lasted more than 2 weeks. During this time, the eldest daughter almost passed the session at the technical school. The youngest had lost 2 teeth. The baby in Adriana's belly began to move, and the chrysanthemums in the flower loomed. Adriana made 2 trips to the antenatal clinic and had an ultrasound. The doctor confirmed that she was having a boy. However, Michael and Adriana were sure of this even before all the tests and ultrasounds. The genetic analysis was good. Adriana was scared to death of all kinds of abnormalities and syndromes. Her friend had a daughter born with Down syndrome, not burdened with pathology. So the child was without any other abnormalities, but one syndrome was enough with a head. The girl at the age of 5 did not speak only separate syllables, but was very affectionate and madly loved to sing and dance. A friend was constantly engaged with her, went to different rehabilitation centers. But the development was very slow. The doctors insisted on me, Daisy, and Adriana reluctantly agreed. I was afraid that a long needle would damage the dense eggs, but everything went well, and the result of the analysis was also good. Mother-in-law went out into the yard. Remove your flower from here. I will plant potatoes in this place. It's September. What potato planting? Adriana asked. 6 months will pass quickly, so that by spring there will be nothing. Do you hear? Adriana answered her nothing and went into the house. Michael's parents' house was old and dark. It smelled like a net. Their part of Michael Adriana had renovated with their own hands, and it was the complete opposite of bright and clean. They'd insulated the walls, made a separate entrance from the street. Michael knew his parents, their tolerable character. They only accepted their granddaughters normally. Adriana was disliked in every possible way. And from the moment she arrived at the house, Michael brought Adriana with Betty and introduced her to his parents. Mom, this is my wife Adriana, her daughter Betty. We'll be living with you until we get our own place built. Hopefully that will be soon. Son, you see we don't have much room. And you brought a girl with a tail. She's not a girl, she's my wife. And I'm gonna ask you to treat her with respect. You don't have to love her, but as my wife, yes. Michael's voice has a metallic tone to it. Come on, we're not gonna hurt your precious wife. Calm down. Come on, live. The mother-in-law shook her lips unhappily. A year later, Betty was born. Her mother-in-law was very fond of her. taking care of her. Adriana thought she'd start treating her better. But no, it was as if her mother-in-law either didn't notice or constantly made remarks. Picked on the child. Looking the wrong way. Milk low fat. Milk high fat. Milk high fat. Milk low fat. Adriana tried to ask why she disliked her. The mother-in-law was silent at first, and then she said, "Why should I love you? I dreamed that my son married a girl, that all the children would be common. But he married a woman with a child. So he'll raise someone else's child. So what's your problem with Betty? She lives in the dormitory. She's rarely here. When she graduates, she'll get a job, do her part. Where's her father? Does he even pay child support? He does, but it's a pittance. He takes jobs like this on purpose. It looks like they pay, but it's a pittance. Why did you get divorced? He started drinking and raising his hand against me, so he had a reason to. A good wife's husband wouldn't drink. You've got him and my Michael down, you see. Why did you do that? I tried to keep our family together, but he drank before me. And now he's gone off the rails. I said everything. My mother-in-law turned her back and walked out. Adriana closed the door to her room and burst into tears. So much time she tried to melt the icy heart of this woman, but it was all in vain. Nothing worked on her mother-in-law. Adriana felt something aching in her chest. She was very upset. She wanted so much to be loved and accepted by her husband's family. What else she needed to do to make that happen, she had no idea. Adriana had been an obedient girl all her childhood. Didn't mom and dad get upset? She loved to draw and make various crafts. She could spend hours watching butterflies and goats. In the fall, she would collect leaves and listen to them. When Adriana was 5 years old, her mother died of cancer. Since then, the girl as a substitute began to be rude to elders, to do everything out of spite. But she was only expressing her strong emotions. She didn't know any other way. Her father punished her for it, and once even hit her. And then Adriana realized that no one would ever love her again, and she withdrew into herself. After a while, her father brought her stepmother into the house. She already had a little girl of her own. Adriana was 8 years old then, and the stepmother's daughter was 2 years old. The little girl received all the love, and Adriana as if not noticed. Everything beautiful and new to little Adriana. But things from the neighbor kids were given to her. Toys were never given to her. And when she tried to play with her stepsister's dolls, she was yelled at for taking away her toys. Adriana learned to read early. She read a lot and a variety of literature. She especially liked historical novels. She imagined herself their heroine, put on fancy dresses, rode in gilded carriages drawn by water horses, danced at balls, and fell in love with princes. In these stories, Adriana was loved. She was admired. Poems were dedicated to her. When she had done her homework, she would take the next book brought from the library and read into the night. The librarians noticed the active young reader and kept new and interesting books especially for her. Adriana had good taste and a musical ear. At school, she loved singing lessons, sang along to the radio, liked to watch song contests, and kept her own songbook where she wrote down the lyrics of her favorite songs. After school, Adriana tried to enter the University of Economics at the Faculty of Goods Introduction. But she did not have enough passing scores. She had to take the documents and take them to the technical school for an accountant. There, Adriana was accepted. She was looking forward to the moment when she could go to the dormitory. Summer passed quickly, and now her father loaded the girl's belongings into the car and brought Adriana to the technical school. He took a bag out of the trunk. He said goodbye, got into the car, and drove away. A new life awaited her. She liked it at the technical school, and it was not very difficult to study. Soon Adriana started to receive an increased scholarship. She spent it mainly on books, paper, and pencils with colors. At once she became an active reader of the library of the technical school. The girls from the group were not particularly eager to communicate with those who lived in the dormitory. They considered themselves better dormitory because they themselves are urban. Therefore, those who lived in the dormitory created their own social circle. Adriana of all socialized only with Kathy from a dysfunctional family. Kathy's mother and father drank and paid no attention to the children. Kathy was not moderately developed, smoked, liked to drink beer and go out with boys from the neighboring technical school. The girls lived in the same room. Adriana liked that Kathy was simple and easy to communicate with. That's why she had a lot of friends and acquaintances. She could find contact with anyone. One day, two young men from the Radio Communications College appeared in their company. Ethan and Benjamin, as they called themselves, were already graduates. The guys invited the girls to the movies, walked around town with them, bought treats, bought beer and cigarettes, Adriana lemonade and candy. Adriana didn't like the taste, the beer and cigarettes. She never learned to smoke, although Kathy showed her how to inhale smoke. Ethan immediately turned his attention to Adriana, a tall, dark-haired girl with brown eyes and a charming smile. She was immediately attracted by her bright appearance. Adriana was not a talker, but Ethan even liked it. He could talk for hours about something interesting. Adriana just listened. She was a good listener. She asked questions. If she didn't understand, she would ask what she was interested in. That's how they spent their time in the evenings, walking and talking. During the day, they both studied. Ethan was in his senior year. Adriana was finishing her third. There was only occasional time. They never quarreled in the evenings, and there seemed to be complete understanding between them. Adriana liked Ethan. She found it easy and pleasant to spend time with him. Gradually, a slight infatuation turned into a crush. Ethan and Adriana began to meet more often. They stood outside the girls' dormitory for long periods of time. At the end of May, it was Kathy's birthday. Almost all the dorm mates had already left for the vacations. Adriana and Kathy had their last practical classes, and they had 2 days to study. Kathy approached Adriana. "I want to have my birthday party tonight. Are you coming with me? Are there a lot of people you want to invite?" "No, just Ethan and Benjamin." "How are you?" "We're going to have a grown-up party." "What's that?" "Well, we'll drink, we'll dance, and we won't get kicked out of the dorm." "No, I made a deal. Commandant Kelly bought champagne and candy. She's only gonna close her eyes for one night. So, you know what you need me to do for you. Can you help me set the place up? I bought cigarettes and champagne, sausage, cheese, loaf. There's butter and sprats in the fridge. You do the boutiques well, and I'll buy juice. Deal? Let's go. We're late for our date." In the evening, the girls set the table. The appetizer was not simple, but Adriana tried to put it on plates so that the whole table was filled, and it seemed that everything was a lot. The guys arrived on time, took a box of chocolates and 4 bottles of champagne out of a bag. Kathy was handed a cosmetic kit of creams. "Wow, that's enough bottles for a whole wedding." Kathy was thrilled. "And the cosmetics are great. I've been wanting to get one of these for a long time, but was constantly out of money. We spent a long time choosing and consulting with the saleswoman. She recommended this set to take here in day and night cream, and for hands, and for feet, and around the eyes. In general, all you can take, and you will be a superstar." "Great." Kathy jumped up and poked the guys in turn on the cheek. "Let's get to the table. It's my birthday after all." Ethan opened the champagne silently and poured it into mugs. "I wanted to buy glasses, but they won't last long. I can't count how many of them have been used up." "Come on, it's fine from the mugs." Benjamin lifted the mug. "Happy birthday to you, Kathy. Be well and happy." Everyone raised their mugs and the check. The champagne hit Adriana on the nose, and she rarely drank it before. On New Year's Eve, she'd only had 1 sip and couldn't drink any more. It wouldn't go down. But today, surprisingly, she drank a whole mug. At once she felt cheerful and light. She wanted to sing, dance, and hug everyone. They poured everyone a second mug. Let me make a toast. Adriana stood up. Table, be ever so cheerful. You're like a sister to me. Adriana smiled at Kathy, walked over and hugged her. Thanks, Carlo. You're great too. The evening flew by quickly. The young people exchanged barbs and jokes. Kathy got up and turned on the tape recorder. A tune came on. It was a slow, very beautiful composition. Kathy walked over to Benjamin and pulled him to the center of the room. They embraced and began to dance. Kathy put her hands on Benjamin's shoulders and kissed him. He didn't pull away. So they danced and kissed. Ethan looked at Adriana. Let's go and dance. Do you mind? I don't mind. Come on. They joined the dancers. Ethan hugged Adriana tightly. She liked the music, liked Ethan, liked the evening itself. She rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, swaying to the beat of the music with him. She wished the evening would never end. But everything has its limits and its time limit. The music ended. Kathy dragged Benjamin out to the balcony to smoke. Ethan lowered himself onto the bed and placed Adriana on his lap. He put one arm around her waist and the other around her shoulders. He stared intently into her eyes. Suddenly, Ethan pulled her to him so that his face was in front of hers. Ethan touched his lips to hers, and the world around her suddenly disappeared. It was just him and her and their evening. Her clothes slid off her shoulders and hips. Adriana was burning in Ethan's arms, hugging and kissing him as if this was the last day of their lives, and they would part forever. The door to the room opened briefly and closed immediately. Kathy jumped to her fist and dragged Benjamin for another walk for a couple hours. Ethan and Adriana lay naked side by side on the narrow bed. The moon was shining brightly through the room's window. Adriana was happy. It wasn't exactly how she had envisioned this moment of her adult life, of course. But what had happened did not bring guilt, rather a sense of fulfillment. Ethan stood up and began to get dressed, dressing awkwardly in front of his friends. Oh, really? I'll be quick. Adriana really quickly got dressed, and the bed was shot. It was like nothing had ever happened here. Ethan poured himself and Adriana more champagne into a mug and raised his own. Here's to you, and to you, Adriana said. The door opened not much, then wider. Then Kathy's head appeared in the doorway. Are you all right? The newlyweds are fine. Are you coming in? Benjamin, come in. Kathy sat down at the table and opened the box of candy. Took one, took a bite, and put it back in the box. Delicious candy. I should try them with champagne. Kathy, happy birthday. Benjamin raised his mug and looked around at the crowd. I wish you happiness. Finish technical school well and get a good job. Benjamin, let me live. Work can wait. Kathy grumbled unhappily. Wish me a woman's happiness. I wish you a woman's happiness. Now that's good. Let's have a drink. Then Kathy asked Ethan and Adriana to go for a walk. They got up and, holding hands, went outside. The night was quiet and without windy. The moon shone brightly, illuminating everything around them. And after technical school, where will you work? Adriana turned her head and admired Ethan's profile. Ethan was tall, blue-eyed, brunette, was trim and shoulder clean. He had rowed in high school and played on the soccer team in tech school. I don't know yet. I think the chip factory is hiring our graduates. I don't know either. I'll be thinking about getting a job next year. That's right. A lot of things can change. Don't be in a hurry. Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. They walked slowly along the street. The bridge supports were fiddling ahead. Let's go and look at the river. We'll go at night. They came to the suspension footbridge, stopped near the fence, and looked into the distance. It was the longest footbridge, about 200 meters long, narrow, only 1.5 meters wide. Standing on it at night was a little creepy. It felt like flying into the water. But it was a vain fear. The construction of the bridge was strong and will stand for many years to come. On this bridge, it was customary for the lovers of the town to declare their love to each other. There was a moonlit path from the moon. The city seemed shrouded in mystery and mysticism, Adriana began to think that this man was her destiny. Naive. In the summer, all the students went home. Adriana and Kathy were no exception. Benjamin and Ethan also went to their parents' house. Before leaving, everyone exchanged phone numbers, promising to call. Adriana arrived at her father's house, and the usual routine began. She read books, went to the river to paint, collected berries and mushrooms in the forest, sewed outfits. Half-sister was already 13 years old, the teenage period. She dyed her hair green, wore one earring, and had a tattoo in the form of a cat on her shoulder. She was allowed everything, got away with everything. Adriana she treated with disdain. She took her room while she was studying, and Adriana had to live on a sofa in the kitchen. In mid-July, Adriana began to feel sick in the mornings. She lost her appetite and became dizzy. She put it all down to the greasy food her stepmother cooked. But the rest of the household was fine. She only became suspicious when her cycle didn't start on time. She waited another week. Nothing happened. Worry was building up. Adriana couldn't sit at home and rushed to the drugstore. She bought a test and tested it. The result was disappointing. Pregnant. The news was overwhelming and alarming. What to do? Adriana decided to call Ethan, dialed the number, and heard the dear voice. Hi. Hi. He's happy to hear from you. How are you doing? Not so good, to say the least. What's wrong? Ethan, I'm pregnant. Are you sure? It's a sure thing. What should I do? Ah, bad timing, of course. No abortion. You'll have the baby. What will I tell my father? Nothing. Don't tell him yet. I'll come and we'll decide everything. Ethan arrived on the weekend and asked for Adriana's hand in marriage. Dad didn't understand the reason for the rush. Kids, what's the rush? Let's have a proper wedding. Wait a couple or 3 months. We don't want a big wedding. We want a normal college wedding. We'll organize it ourselves. We just have to get everyone together. All right, do as you see fit. Thanks, Dad. Adriana hugged her father. She really missed his love. But her father was busy with her stepmother and her sister Sonia, and there was always something going on, and she needed constant attention and adoration. Her stepmother had no love for her, and her father simply, unconditionally loved Sonia. At the end of August, Ethan and Adriana got married. Those friends who were able to attend were invited to the wedding. On Adriana's side were her father and stepmother, and on Ethan's side were his parents and older brother. The wedding was played in a local dining room. There was plenty of room, and the food was good. Ethan earned money for the wedding by repairing audio equipment. His parents added a little. Adriana's father paid for the dresses and rings. Adriana's witness was Kathy. Lena was the witness. They stuck together as a couple. Adriana could choose any wedding dress she wanted for Mao. Her belly was not yet visible, so she chose fitted, with open shoulders and a wide bodice skirt, beautifully dwarfed by lace and pearlized beads of different sizes. Instead of a veil, Adriana chose a pull in the form of a silver tree branch with rhinestones. White shoes, she bought the most ordinary ones. When she tried on the whole outfit, she looked magically tender and very beautiful in the mirror. May this outfit bring me happiness. Adriana made a wish. Young people were making noise and joking near the registry office. The young people were worried. Finally, it was their turn to go to the reception hall. Adriana, Ethan, Kathy, and Benjamin walked in front. All the other guests a little further back. The registrar's speech was short. She wished the newlyweds love and fidelity to each other and suggested that they exchange rings. Ethan put a ring on Adriana's finger, and she put a ring on his finger in return. The registrar congratulated the young couple and at the end of the ceremony invited them to seal the bond of marriage with their first family kiss. They kissed. And once again, the world around them disappeared. Adriana's heart froze, and her sense of time disappeared. She dissolved in Ethan and in her feeling for him. They only woke up when the guests started making noise. Did you guys break all the records? We were going to order pizza here to make the most of the time. Kathy laughed. Can you kiss? Everybody laughed. We walked to the cafeteria. It was not far from the registry office. Parents were already standing in front of the entrance to the canteen. They sprinkled grain on the newlyweds and wished them happiness. The wedding was fun and not without adventures. A couple of young people managed to fight, so they had to get a first aid kit and treat wounds. Adriana threw her bouquet high up. The bouquet was caught not by Kathy, but by another classmate, Lisa. Kathy took offense. So I'm not getting married. Yes, you will, said Benjamin. Not all at once. Take your time. You're a comforting man, aren't you, Benjamin? Kathy took him by the arm and said, you will be the most beautiful bride. I promise you. Benjamin squeezed Kathy's hand. The wedding lasted only one day. The next day, the young people gathered in the dormitory. They brought snacks and champagne and had a party. Commandant Kelly came to the light. She was immediately poured champagne in a mug. Tip of the hat to you, yes, love. Kelly's toast was short. We'll give you a private room as a gift from the administration. She drank the drink in one gulp, took a piece of sausage from her plate, and went to her room. Thank you. Ethan and Adriana barely had time to shout after her. The party continued into the morning. They found a guitar somewhere, sang songs, danced. The guests scattered to their rooms. Only in the morning Ethan and Adriana did not even undress from fatigue. They just collapsed on the bed, hugging each other. In the morning, the whole dorm was looking for Brian. Everyone had a headache from too much champagne and wine the night before. Some were swallowing aspirin. Others were brewing coffee. Ethan got up and went to the kitchen. 15 minutes later, he returned, carrying flavored coffee in a cup. The cup was very beautiful. Adriana, my wife. Wake up. Coffee in bed. My God, I feel like an aristocrat. I want it every day. What's with the cup? Did the neighbors borrow it? It's beautiful. You're prettier than any cup. Oh yeah, sleep at night with makeup on. I look like I fell out of a tree. Baba Yaga is now prettier than me. Adriana tried to laugh, but faltered. My head hurts. I'll bring champagne now. Being aristocrats is like that in everything. Ethan left. Adriana quickly took off her wedding dress, put on her regular clothes, grabbed a towel, and headed for the shower. Washed off all her makeup, had a good wash, barely tidied up her hair, and went back to the room. Ethan had already brought champagne and 2 glasses, but where would the glasses come from? Luda gave them to me in our miserable dorm. She says there's only 2 left, so she's giving them to us. Oh great, here's our first family dinnerware. We won't have these dishes for a long time. Ethan smiled. Glass has a way of twisting. I've made sure more than once. These won't stay beautiful for long. I'll have to stop by Kelly's to thank her. We'll go in together. We should get the keys to our room. I can't even imagine. My own room, Adriana replied. They ate a breakfast of sandwiches they'd made from leftover sausage and sliced bread and went down to Kelly's. Here came the newlyweds. How's your health? Morning. Thank you, I'm fine. Kelly, thank you for the glasses. They're beautiful. We were wondering when we'd get our room keys. I'll give them to you right now. What's the holdup? It's just that we need to do some repairs, paint the ceilings and floors and wallpaper. I can give you the paint, but you can buy the wallpaper yourself. Thanks, Kelly. Ethan took the keys, and he and Adriana went up to the 3rd floor to see the room. The room was bright, but in a bit of a state of disrepair. The wallpaper was hanging in pieces, the ceiling was yellowish in color, and there was the smell of smoke. Adriana was a little upset, but then decided that things would be much better after the renovations. They would freshen everything up, and the smell would disappear. And it did. Ethan invited Benjamin over, and Kathy volunteered to help paint the floor. Within a month, they had the room looking decent. The superintendent came in to see how well they'd done. Oh, well done. Now that's the way she does things. We did what we wanted. I wish you happiness in your new place. Adriana was due to give birth in February. Until then, she had to pass the session and apply for a sabbatical. Ethan was often late in the evening and came home drunk. Adriana didn't pay attention at first. She thought, well, they celebrate the session with friends to eat. But when he began to come between sessions under the fly, and she began to slowly resent, why are you drunk every night? Well, once, twice, but you almost every day come drunk. I want a sober husband by my side. Adriana's being picky. It's just the guys invited me. It was hard to say no. You should try it for a change. Time passed under the winter clothes. I could hardly see my stomach, but it was getting harder and harder to walk. It was a snowy winter. Adriana could hardly move on the street. Her gait resembled a duck's. On February 23, she set the table to celebrate the men's holiday. Ethan arrived late. She was about to fall asleep. On these winter days in the evenings, she wanted to go to bed early. Oh, the field is set. Happy feast. Sit down. You've had dinner. There's a present for you on the table. Thank you. I'm fine. Ethan didn't even look at the present. It's delicious. Why don't you eat it yourself? I don't want to, said the young wife. I'm going to lie down now. Sit with me for a while. I just made an order a while ago. The customer arrived. He asked me to come early. I'll sit a little, but not for long. I can't sit for long. My stomach is tight. It seems to me that the baby is inside, with all its arms and legs, and it's always pushing my head, or my arm is sticking out. Wow, you're taking it all in. I'd probably be dead by now. Nature designed women to be able to handle pregnancy and motherhood with ease. Otherwise, mankind would have died out long ago. Adriana laughed. And men are a relic of the past. An atavism. Ethan grinned, took a drink and exhaled. Soon, all but a few will be extinct. They'll be left to reproduce. You say for reproduction. 2. Will the women be lining up to serve them? Adriana frowned, then smiled. I imagined the picture. Yes, that's exactly what would happen. A few individuals to breed. Women in line. Ethan smiled contentedly. That was a good one. Yeah, you put everything in the fridge. I'm gonna go lay down and lie down. I'll eat a little more, then I'll put it away, the boy replied. Ethan sat there pouring himself a drink and a snack. He was kind of gloomy. Adriana put it down to his fatigue. Sleep came quickly, and she fell into it like a pit. In the dream, she was walking along the bank of a river, and a boat was floating on the river. In the boat sat Ethan, smiling but not looking at her. She shouted and waved at him, but he paid no attention to her. The boat disappeared around a bend in the river. Adriana stopped and suddenly felt her feet sinking into the sand. It was the sands of the future, and she sank deeper and deeper until she was up to her neck. She screamed and called for help, but no one answered or came. Suddenly, a man in camouflage, a stranger to her, ran down the hill. He saw what was going on, quickly oriented himself, found some sticks, put them down, lay down himself, and crawled up to Adriana and started pulling her by the hand. Then other people began to descend the mountain. Suddenly, a whole crowd formed around Adriana. She was pulled out and laid down on the grass. She was lying completely without Selena. At this point, Adriana woke up. Ethan was sleeping soundly next to her. She got up and went to get a drink of water. Her stomach was pulling and very hard. The child did not push. When she went to the wash basin, she felt something running down her legs, and she could not stop it. It was her water breaking. Ethan, get up. The water's breaking. What about the water? What do we do? An ambulance. Yeah, we should call an ambulance. I've already packed my bags. I just need to get changed myself. Ethan got up quickly, dressed, washed his face, turned to Adriana. How much time do we have? They explained to me in the course at the maternity hospital that there's 12 o'clock after the departure. That's when I'll make myself a quick coffee and I'm ready. Take your time. You can have breakfast. And I won't have anything, just water. Ethan went to the kitchen, made coffee, brought it to the room, and started to eat breakfast. It was undesirable to drink coffee, but even its smell was unpleasant for her. Now, during her pregnancy, her love was cream. She could drink 2 glasses at a time and still wanted more. And she also craved sweets, but she only allowed herself marshmallows so she wouldn't gain too much weight. However, the extra 5 pounds were not growing. Adriana dressed one last time, looked over the things on top, put the exchange card in her purse, her passport, but she herself could not interfere with her stomach. Ethan finished his breakfast, began to dress. Then he walked over to Adriana, who was sitting down, and pulled on her low, soft suede boots without a lock. I helped her put on her down jacket, and she put on her hat. The cab was parked near the entrance. It had snowed all night, and there was a thin path leading away from the driveway. Ethan opened the car door, and Adriana struggled to get into the back seat. The driver had thoughtfully slid the front seat farther forward. They drove through the snowy city, and the snow continued to fall. The driver made sure to pull up to the front porch of the emergency room. Ethan got out and helped Adriana out. He took the bags from the driver and paid for them, holding Adriana under his arm. He opened the door and they went inside. There were already 3 couples sitting there. The woman had already changed into a robe and slippers. Adriana had taken off her coat. Ethan got the slippers and helped her take off her boots. She changed into her robe and was ready to be examined. The line moved fairly quickly. Soon, there was only 1 pair left in front of them. You'll take the coat and boots home. Let's put them in a bag. Here's a big one and a separate one for the boots. She took care of everything. Don't worry. Strangely enough, she was calm. The impending arrival of the baby didn't seem to bother her at all. But that was only outwardly. Inwardly, she was tense. Sanikova Adriana. The midwife called out to her. Adriana rose heavily and went into the office. There sat 2 medical workers, a midwife and a nurse. Adriana put the exchange card and passport on the table. They started filling out the documents. When all the data had been entered, the midwife invited her for an examination. During the examination, some more near-dense water came out. The midwife had been working in this maternity hospital since the day it opened, had delivered many babies, and now, based on her advanced age, she had been put on reception. Mani, you will give birth today. Savaliva took her to the delivery room. The midwife helped Adriana down from the chair, signed the bags. The nurse wrote papers with her name on them and put them in the bags on top, then took them and led Adriana to the elevator. They went up to the 3rd floor where the delivery room was. Lie down on the couch. They are coming to take a blood test. Adriana lay down. A woman in labor was lying on the next bunk and moaned softly. There was no one else. The doctors came in. A heartbeat machine was brought up. The baby was recorded. A young nurse with a suitcase came running, quickly pulled out a test tube and landscape, pricked her fingers, took blood for analysis. The anesthesiologist came in and said that due to the wrong position of the baby, it was decided to have an emergency cesarean section. He began to fill out a questionnaire, asked about reactions to medications, the presence of diabetes mellitus, then told me how the anesthesia procedure would take place. He said that the operating room would be ready in an hour. Adriana lay on the couch, her whole life flashing before her eyes. The upcoming surgery was frightening. She had previously read cesarean section, wrote that the stitch hurts, it is hard to walk. How will she take care of the baby? But she's not the only one who's having this surgery. I mean, how do moms do it? She'll do it. They brought a sheer cape and a hat. Adriana changed and lay down on the gurney. The nurses wheeled her into the OR. From above, the ceiling was being moved. She couldn't orient herself where they were taking her. There were turns and doors, then turns again. And then they were in the operating room. A huge lamp lit up and shone in her eyes. Curtains were placed in front of Adriana so she couldn't see the surgical process, and in the stadium took Adriana by the hand and sat her down, gave her a shot in the spine and injected medicine. Then put a pulse on her finger, Oksana a meter in a vein, put a catheter, and began to gradually inject the drug for us ultrasound from the fact that the fetus was pressing on the veins. Adriana was feeling dizzy. She really wanted the weight off of her. The drug started to take effect, and Adriana stopped feeling her lower body. "How are you feeling?" The anesthesiologist held her hand. "You say she won't fall asleep with me. I'm fine, but the baby's pushing and I'm dizzy. You'll feel better soon." Now they're making the incision, taking out the baby and this little girl. The doctors cut the umbilical cord and lifted the baby high so that Adriana could see her daughter. A feeling of joy, gratitude, and emotion awoke in her. "My daughter, now you will be treated and stitched up. After that, you will be taken to the intensive care unit where you will spend at least 6 o'clock for observation. You're going to be a little dizzy. That's normal when the anesthesia wears off. Ask the nurses for a blanket." The baby was brought in and put to the breast. Adriana felt tenderness for this little red lump of life. Then the baby was taken away to be examined. Adriana was taken to the intensive care unit. There were 4 other women in the room with her. All of them were also post-C-section. As the anesthesia began to wear off, Adriana felt very cold indeed. So much so that her teeth were chattering and she was shivering. "Nurse, I'm cold," shouted Adriana. The nurse came with a blanket and covered her thoroughly. "Your body may be itchy now. Do not scratch it under any circumstances. You'll be itchy later on. It's a side effect of the anesthesia." And indeed, when Adriana accidentally scratched her chin, her whole body immediately became itchy. She wanted to scratch everything with fierceness to take away the itch. But she what to eat. The force was held back. Her neighbors were experiencing the same thing and complaining. Adriana asked for the phone to inform Ethan, but he did not pick up. Then she wrote a message. She gave birth to a daughter. Weight so-and-so, height so-and-so. Everything went well. She got nothing in reply. Adriana was now unable to think about where Ethan was and what he was so busy doing that he couldn't answer. 6 o'clock passed, and the roommates began to be taken to their wards. They came for Adriana. Again, the ceiling floated overhead. Turns, doors, turns again. Rolled into the ward and put her next to the bed. "Let's carefully climb over and onto the bed," one of the orderlies commanded. First one leg, then the other. Adriana tried to do so, but a sharp pain pierced her stomach. Biting her lip, she courageously and patiently moved her body onto the bed. The pain seemed to spread throughout her body. Everything was hurting already, and Adriana groaned. Now the nurse would come in and inject herself with painkillers. "Be patient, sweetheart." The orderly squeezed the plums, looked at her. She would have been glad to be with Adriana longer, but there were many women in labor, and each one demanded attention. The father called. "Adriana, what about your daughter? How did you have a baby?" "Daddy, the girl's name is Betty." "Congratulations. What good news. How are you doing?" "Not too bad. I had an emergency C-section after the surgery because the baby wasn't laying right. There was no other way. My daughter is recovering. The hospital will do whatever they need to do. Take care of yourself." "You take care of yourself too, Daddy." Adriana tried to turn on her side, but the pain was getting in the way. After struggling and grabbing the side of the bed, she finally turned around. A nurse came in and administered a painkiller. It became a little easier, and Adriana fell asleep. When she woke up, she saw that there was a plate with a strange liquid on the nightstand, and on the next bed there was a neighbor who had been brought in while Adriana was asleep. "I'm Miranda," said the girl and fixed her long dark hair. "I'm Adriana. And who was born to you?" "A boy. I had a girl." "So you had an operation after me?" "Yes, you were wheeled out and I was wheeled in. My stomach hurts a lot." "And you?" "Oh, and the nurse told me that they're gonna be lifting us out in 12 o'clock. "Oh, only if it's a crane." Adriana laughed, but she didn't let the pain get the best of her. "We're definitely not going up without it." Miranda smiled. "I can't laugh. It hurts me too." "Is this your first child?" Yes, we wanted a girl, and it was a boy. But it's good too, and we were just waiting for a baby. I don't care who. That's great. I've already bought a crib, and the sides for it, and the stroller is already there. We'll go for a walk. We just picked it out. My husband has to buy and put it together. What's that on the nightstand? We're not supposed to eat after the anesthesia. I was told they'd bring a light meal. This must be it. She looks so appetizing to eat. Do you want some of this soup? No. I'm eating it. Will there be anything in my stomach? The nurse came in and said she had to get up. Adriana got up first. She walked a short distance from the bed and came back up. She wasn't dizzy and her stomach felt empty and light. Adriana thought sadly that there was no one else inside pushing and disturbing her day and night. Girls, in an hour we can go wash up. A cheerful red-haired nurse peeked into their room. Oh, great. I'm sick and tired of this construction, afraid to turn around to avoid hitting it. And indeed, another nurse came in and freed them from the marking tubes and invited Miranda into the shower room first. She waited for her to get a towel and underwear and went with her. There she explained how to do everything and stood by to help in case she suddenly felt sick. Then it was Adriana's turn, and she was happy to go swimming. She loved it, but for now there was only a hygienic shower. She bought a special long patch to keep the stitching for the suture from getting wet. Miranda, when do you think we will get the babies? I don't know. They said the next day. Just as she said that, the door swung open and the nurse drove off. Visa. One rolled up and to the other Adriana. In them lay 2 tightly rolled packages. Following the orderly came with, and the red-headed nurse invited Miranda to learn how to undress and dress the baby. Miranda took the baby in her arms and walked over to the personalized table. And you watch and learn. The nurse invited Adriana in. Miranda carefully unwrapped the baby. He was so tiny and fragile. With confident movements, the nurse showed the women how to hold the baby while diapering, how to put on and fasten the diaper. It all seemed simple to Adriana, but when it was her turn to crucify her daughter, she became terribly agitated. Her hands trembled as she took the defenseless body. She was afraid of hurting something. Having mastered her feelings, Adriana confidently took the girl, just as the nurse had said, and the soap sewed to pairs, put it on the table, then took out some pretty clothes from her bag and dressed the little girl. It was the turn of feeding. The nurse showed how to put to the breast. The women did what other women had done for centuries before them, feeding babies. It didn't go well the first time, or did they think so? The babies opened wide erotically and tried very hard to get milk. After an hour, both babies were taken away for procedures and told they would bring them back in the evening. Adriana was pleased with herself, but her stomach was very sore. The painkillers helped, but not for long. She tried to sleep. It succeeded with great difficulty. As soon as she fell asleep, the doctor came in for his rounds, touching her stomach to make sure that everything was going well after the birth. It was painful, but Adriana gritted her teeth and endured it in her own interest. Then there was lunch, for which we had to go to the canteen. The woman and the laughing woman walked slowly and strangely to the dining room, but they could sit at the table, unlike those who gave birth naturally, who could only stand in the dining room. The tables were for 4. There was a line of 15 people standing at the window, all with their own spoons and mugs. The hospital gave utensils to those who did not have any, but recommended to bring their own. Lunch was sparse but enough to eat and not be hungry. Adriana ate everything. Miranda didn't eat cottage cheese casserole, was put off her plate, and didn't like cabbage stew. But Adriana ate even that because it helped with her digestion. After quiet hour, they'd brought in the babies again. A red-haired nurse brought them in. Mommies, here are your babies. Now they'll stay with you until your discharge. Do you remember how to take care of them? Any questions? No. Adriana and Miranda answered and laughed together. It was both joyful and anxious that the babies were staying with them. Then I'm leaving. If you need anything, go to your post. Each moved you to your side and admired the sleeping baby. When asleep, they were so sweet and defenseless. Their eyes hadn't quite opened yet, and they didn't quite see the world around them. And so the days until discharge dragged on. Getting up, washing, dressing, feeding the baby. They took turns in the dining room and tried to eat quickly so that the other could go too. During all this time, Ethan sent only one letter of congratulations on the birth of his daughter. He never wrote again. Adriana had no time to wonder what was wrong with him or where he was, probably busy with work. So deep down she wanted to hope. In a day, Adriana and the baby were to be discharged. Before discharge, all women in labor had an ultrasound to make sure everything was okay. Adriana healed on time, with no complications. Adriana left the ultrasound room and dialed Ethan. He didn't pick up for a long time, and then she heard his forbidding voice. "Hello, hi. Is it me? Have you been drinking? I had a little last night. Why? Do I have the right? I'm being discharged tomorrow. I want you to meet me. You've packed the crib, and you haven't yet. I'll do it today. So please do it. Our daughter needs a place to sleep. What are we gonna name our daughter, Betty? I like that name. All right. Chuckles, I'll need you to go and register her. It'll be done by what time you get discharged. I'll take a cab. I'll call you after 2. There'll be time to come. I've got to get ready for work. I'll go to the supervisor's tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow." Adriana put away all the unnecessary things. She looked at Miranda. She was holding her son in her arms and saying something softly to him. Adriana looked at her daughter. She was sleeping peacefully. She thought about what was ahead of her when she arrived home and had to take care of her daughter, the house, and her husband. She imagined sitting over the baby's bed at night and singing lullabies to her, Ethan smiling and taking the baby in his arms, rocking her if she cried, of them walking together with the stroller through the park. In her dreams, she was happy and peaceful. She has a family where she is loved and where she is loved. This was comforting to Adriana. Betty was eating well, sleeping well, and slowly gaining the weight she had initially lost after birth. She had quite opened her eyes by now and was looking around with wonder at everything for a little while awake and then falling asleep again. At night, as she slept in a jumpsuit that said "Love Mommy" and Daddy on it, Adriana felt a pinching feeling in her chest and cried. She cried, wiped away her tears, and cried again. Her heart sank with emotion. The daughter was so tiny and so defenseless. "I will protect you from everything, mine, sweet daughter." Adriana made her vows to her child, and the child heard nothing and slept soundly. The next day in the morning, she was told that she could go home in the afternoon. Adriana fed and changed her clothes in the meantime. My daughter started to get ready to go home at 12 o'clock. Ethan didn't call, but her father did. "Hello, daughter. How are you doing? How's the baby?" "Hey, Dad. She's fine. She's being discharged today. Ethan's supposed to be here, but he hasn't called yet. You call me if you need anything." Dad's voice sounded kind of weird. "It's gonna be okay. Dad, I'll be in touch. Bye, daughter. Bye, Daddy. Kiss Betty for me." "Okay." After talking to her father, Adriana felt uneasy. It was unclear what was causing this uneasiness, but it wasn't going away, it was only growing. Adriana looked at her daughter to see if she was okay and dialed Ethan. No one on the other end answered, and she dialed several times. It was no use. Time was running out. The papers had already arrived. It was time to get ready to go out. Adriana dialed her father's number. She was almost crying. "Daddy, can you take a cab and come and pick us up?" Ethan won't pick up the phone. "I can, daughter. I'm all alone now. I'll come. I'm already packed. Call me when you're on your way." I put Betty on and came down. "Take my coat and my black shoes in the closet, please. I don't have any clothes." Ethan took everything away when I went into labor, and a scarf or something. "Betty has a fur envelope. Good thing I brought it. Warm clothes, too. I'll take your blanket that's in the closet so Betty won't get cold. Okay, Daddy. Adriana ended the call and cried. Her husband came to pick her up. He decorated the car with balloons and was allowed at the gatehouse to drive right up to the exit. Miranda dressed the baby, dressed herself, shrunk. She became quite different from the Miranda she had seen on the first day. Miranda was a very beautiful young woman. She said goodbye to Adriana. But I wish you all the best, a speedy recovery, and many happy days. Here is my phone number. Miranda held out a piece of paper with Adriana's number written on it. Thank you, Miranda. Adriana hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. All the best to you and the baby too. Long and joyful days together. You recover quickly too. And take care of yourself. She also hugged and kissed Adriana and took the baby in her arms. Miranda's husband came into the room, a tall, thin guy. He had shoe covers on his feet. He took the bags and was the first to leave. I waved goodbye to God, Adriana said, and walked to the window. Miranda and her husband and child had not come down yet. They were nowhere to be seen. Adriana didn't know yet that on the way out they were writing everyone out. A photographer would catch them and offer to take a family photo. Here they were finally out of the driveway. Miranda's husband walked to the car, opened the trunk, and loaded all the stuff in there. He opened the back door in front of her and took the baby from her. Miranda got into the car and her husband placed the newborn in a special seat. Adriana waved from the window. Miranda waved back. The car slowly moved off and took Miranda to her new family life with the baby. The phone rang. It was Daddy. Daughter, I was on my way downstairs. Daddy, please come upstairs to me. There's a shoe shine machine up there. Put on your shoes and come up to my place. I have to get my bags. Why didn't I think of that? You old fool. I'm waiting for you. Adriana took one last look to see if she'd forgotten any belongings or documents. Everything was in order. She didn't feel like putting on makeup at all. She was upset that Ethan hadn't called and come to pick her up. Had he packed the crib? Would there be a place for Betty to sleep? And the bathtub. She'd asked him to buy one the night before she gave birth. I guess he forgot and didn't get it. How do you bathe the baby? That's how upset her father saw her. Here I am, like Betty, pretty, but let's go. The father took the bags and they went to the elevator. They went down. There he took Betty in his arms and showed Adriana the bag with her shoes and coat and scarf. Everything was lying on the bench. Adriana got around quickly. Her legs felt surprisingly good. Slipped into comfortable boots, coat, scarf, and she was ready. The steps are slippery. Let's walk carefully. You carry the baby and I'll carry the bag and walk in front of you. A photographer came up to them. Would you like to take a picture? When he saw Adriana's tearful eyes. No, we don't want one. Adriana and her father walked out of the entrance. The car was parked outside. They didn't have to walk far. February was snowy, but today it had melted a little, and there was ice in some places. Adriana stepped very carefully, very afraid of falling. The driver got out of the car, opened the trunk, and put their things in there. The chair was already installed in the cabin. Adriana did not yet know how to buckle up the little ones. The father volunteered to help. Come on, I'm buckled in. I've worked in cabs. I know how to do it. All right, you get in the car. Don't get cold. Drive us, please, very carefully without sudden braking in potholes, avoiding everything. Got it, Chief, Cabby responded. Can we go now? Half an hour later, they were already at the hostel. The room was locked. Adriana looked for the key she always carried with her. She opened the door and was horrified. There were empty beer bottles and chip and pizza wrappers on the floor. The crib was littered with clothes. Ethan lay on the bed and slept soundly. The room was unbreathable from the smell of booze. The father frowned unhappily. Daughter, let's go to our place. We'll get you a room. No, Dad. I can handle it. Just help me. What do you say? Dad set the bags down, opened the window. Adriana put Betty on the bed and began to disassemble the crib. Father found a bag and collected bottles and packages in it. Half an hour later, the room took on a lively appearance, and Ethan still hadn't woken up. "Daughter, what shall we do with him? I want to beat him up, the bastard. How could he get drunk on a day like this and not pick you up from the hospital? I'll never forgive him for that. Daddy, I'll take care of it. Thank you so much." Adriana hugged her father and kissed his prickly cheek. "Can you go? Let me go to the store and buy you some food." "Daughter, I'm not leaving you." "All right. Make sure you buy milk and bread and whatever you want. I'll be back soon. If he tries to hurt you, I'll be right there to put his brains in his place. All key." Father left and Adriana went to make a nest for Betty. She took out of the closet bedding, a blanket, quickly freed the crib from the military clothes on it, and shot the mattress. First put on Not My Lingering sheet, then put on the blanket on top of the usually under blanket. She used the bed instead of a personalized table, slowly untied the pink bow, unfolded the blanket. Next was to unbutton the jumpsuit and pull Betty out of it. Betty grudgingly said, "Daughter, are you home now?" With these words, Adriana put Betty in the crib. She started to shake her head in surprise as far as she could. Her arms and legs moved erratically. She couldn't seem to control them. "And it was you, Ethan, struggling to get out of bed. I'm sorry. I was celebrating the birth of my daughter and things got out of hand. But I promise it won't happen again. You don't have to. You were supposed to pick us up from the hospital, not Dad." Adriana was angry and hurt. "But I'm sorry. Please forgive me. It's my fault. I'll think about whether to forgive you or not. I am very angry with you, and there is no telling when I will be able to calm down. The idea of a soul award to raise the room is a good one." Ethan stood up, grabbed a towel, and staggered to the shower room. There was a knock on the door. His father came in and brought a whole bag of groceries: milk, bread, vegetable oil, potatoes, green apples, bananas, kefir, cooked chicken cutlets, tea, juice, cookies, and condensed milk. "I've heard that when you're breastfeeding, you should drink lots of tea with condensed milk to get more milk in your breasts." "Okay, Daddy, you are the best," replied Adriana. "You're my daughter. How can I leave you?" Where did that father choose his words? He woke up, the bastard. I sent him to the shower, and he apologized. "Dad, I don't like the fact that he can't control himself." "I don't like it either." "Then you've got it all figured out on your own. If you don't need my help anymore, I'll go home and chew." "Daddy, your folks are waiting for you." "Yeah, the phone's been ringing off the hook. Where did I go?" "Thank you so much again." His father faced Ethan at the door, gave him a scornful look, and walked out without a word. Ethan picked up the brush and dustpan and began to sweep neatly. He got dressed and went out, took out the garbage. He walked for a long time and came back, carrying a bouquet of 9 dark pink roses. He theatrically got down on one knee and handed Adriana the bouquet. "Thank you for your daughter. And forgive me. Assholes, please. I'll think about it. Please don't take too long to think about it. I want peace in our family." That Betty cried. "It's time to feed my daughter. You go make something to eat. Daddy brought some cutlets to heat up and a bunch of potatoes. I'm very hungry." And obeying, Ethan took the food and went to the kitchen. Then he came for a pot with a skillet. Adriana was feeding Betty, and there was something sacred, magical, mesmerizing about it. Ethan admired it. "Everything's ready. I'll set the table. I just can't have no alcohol. Have you chosen your ration yet? I've only had one drink. I'm not gonna do it again, honestly. We have to celebrate your arrival." Ethan set the table, brought a steaming pan of potatoes and cutlets from the kitchen, put them on a rack, took out a bottle of wine and 2 glasses from the cupboard, which the Commandant Kelly had given them for their wedding. Adriana had already put Betty to bed and sat down at the table, put potatoes on for herself and Ethan, cutlets each, poured juices for herself, a glass. Ethan opened the bottle and filled his glass. "I want to drink to you girls, to keep you happy and healthy." "Thank you," Adriana replied dryly. She drank the juice and began to eat greedily. "Did you buy a bathtub?" "No, but my neighbors promised to give me theirs. It's almost as good as new." "Yeah, only 2 kids have bathed in it. But I'll buy a new one." "Tomorrow you want to buy it today?" "Yeah, we're having our first bath. We'll invite Kelly. She's like a mom to us." "She sure is. But cheers." Ethan chugged a glass of wine and began to pour another. "Wait, you said you'd only have one. Can I have a couple more?" "I don't feel like having one. I have to meet you properly. You said you wouldn't have any more." "I gave my word, and I kept it. 2 drinks, that's all. But we'll see." They had dinner. Ethan had 3 glasses of wine, Adriana 3 glasses of juice. Ethan wasn't lying. He didn't pour any more, but saved it for tomorrow. Betty woke up from the window, and Adriana went over to the crib, rocked her, then took the baby in her arms, sat on the bed, and began to feed her. Ethan sat next to her and watched his wife and daughter. Betty ate and sang again. She was the perfect baby, at least for now. Ethan put his arm around Adriana's shoulders. "I'm sorry, okay? I've missed you guys so much. But it's only been a week." "Yeah, there's always late nights at work. My name is. As a young professional, I can't say no, or I won't be accepted." "Okay, at work, but at home." "Why drink at home?" Adriana asked. "But the neighbors came to celebrate the birth of their daughter." "Yes, of course. The neighbors came and got you drunk. So much so that you forgot that you had to pick up your wife and child from the hospital. But your father took you. I knew he would, so I didn't worry. It's a big day for our family. And I wish it was you picking us up, not my dad. It turns out my dad cares more about us than you do." "Yeah, I get it, and I get it. I'm sorry if you can. It really upset me. I don't know when I'm gonna get over it." Adriana put the leftovers in the refrigerator and went to the kitchen to wash the dishes. Ethan sat and watched his daughter sleep. Betty, especially, did not bother crying at night, ate well, and was gaining weight. She was a cheerful, curious girl. She was interested in everything. Adriana took the baby in her arms and walked around the room with her, naming things. Then they would go out into the corridor. Walking outside, Adriana also often took Betty out of the stroller and showed her the world. The girl would look at everything with curiosity. One day they came in from the street, and Adriana noticed that Betty was sluggish. He touched her and she was hot. The thermometer read 38.5. Adriana didn't know what to do. She called her father. "Daddy, Betty is sick. She's feverish. She's lethargic. She won't eat. What do we do?" "Calm down, daughter. You were sick a lot, too, weren't you?" "What did Mommy do?" "Mommy undressed you and wet toweled you. Just warm water." "I'll do that." "Thanks, Daddy. Call me if you need anything. Tomorrow, call the doctor at home." "I will. Good night." Adriana undressed the baby, took a towel, looked in a basin of warm water, and began to rub her body. Betty did not resist, breathing heavily. Adriana measured her temperature again at 38. It had come down a little. There was no sleep in either eye. Ethan had not yet come home from work. Adriana made herself some local tea and sat beside the crib. She listened and was afraid to miss the warning signs of something bad. She had read a lot about childhood diseases, knew that there were very severe forms, and children sometimes died from them. She couldn't bear the thought of her daughter dying. She cried. She cried for a long time. Ethan came into the room and was frightened what happened. Story was sick, high fever. I sat there and thought that there are diseases from which babies die, and I thought that my little girl would die. So I cried. Don't even think about it. It's just a virus. Your body's probably building up immunity. That's why you have the fever. I read about it without thinking, and I'm interested in the subject too. I was just reading an article at work today. I come home. Betty is sick. We're going to call the doctor tomorrow. We'll buy some medicine. What will she prescribe? It's nervous. I've been under a lot of stress lately. Calm down. I'm here for you, Ethan said. The next day, we called a pediatrician from the children's clinic. The doctor came, examined, and listened. Betty looked at her throat, told her to put her to the breast more often. If the temperature will be too high above 38, drink, use suppositories, and all antibiotics do not need. Don't do that, just watch for now. Here's my cell phone. If anything changes, cough or rash, call me. Adriana liked the pediatrician. She was a middle-aged woman with neat hair and manicure, spoke briefly and clearly without a lot of unnecessary words, could calm panicked moms. Adriana spent the day with Betty in her arms. If the girl fell asleep, she napped, and she fed the baby on demand. By evening, the fever had gone down and then spiked again in the morning, but not as high. Adriana stayed close to the crib, drinking tea while sitting next to it. If she went to the kitchen or to the shower, she ran back. She was afraid something had happened, but nothing happened, and Adriana calmed down. At night, she slept soundly, opening her eyes at any rustle. In the morning, changing her daughter's clothes, Adriana noticed red spots on Betty's body. She immediately called the pediatrician, frightened. "Hi, this is Betty's mom. She has developed red spots on her body, and her temperature has dropped as low as 35. It's a birth virus. It's a common childhood illness. You don't need to put anything on the spots. They'll go away on their own. It's all right. Betty has done well. Come see me next week for an appointment. I'll need to have the girl measured and weighed. Thank you." I was scared out of my wits. Adriana and her daughter went to see the pediatrician once a month. The pediatrician examined the girl, measured her height and weight, and wrote it all down in her file. Soon it was time for colic. Baby Betty screamed incessantly. She took turns being carried by Adriana or Ethan. If he was home, Adriana ironed the quadruple towels with an iron and laid them on the baby's tummy. I bought special colic drops on the advice of my pediatrician, but nothing helped. Betty would go quiet and then start screaming like crazy. The whole dorm knew that Betty had colic. So Kelly came and brought fennel seeds, told Adriana to brew them and give them to the girl a little at a time. "And drink it yourself, it won't hurt." "Oh, thank you. My mom used to give me something like that too. And I forgot, use it already. I made them. I don't know what they're for." Then I remembered that my sister-in-law gave them to me when her granddaughter had colic. It helped. It should help Betty too. Adriana immediately went to brew the seeds, condemned them, poured them into a mug, and put them into a syringe without a needle so that it would be easier to give them to Betty. The girl, wrinkling her nose unhappily as the incomprehensible liquid was forced into her mouth, drank a couple sips and began to sip the rest. Adriana sat all wet, drank the rest of the potion, and started to change her clothes. She changed herself and changed her clothes. "Betty, here, my daughter, you and I are dressed in clean clothes, and the colic will run away from us. They'll go away." Adriana really wanted to believe that. Maybe it was the potion, or maybe it was past their time. But the colic was gone. But the teeth were starting to come in. For Adriana, another marathon began. Betty cried and scrubbed, putting her fists in her mouth and drooling. Adriana bought a special ring for the little girl to chew on honestly. Betty began to scratch with pleasure at the new toy. However, not only the ring was used, but everything that little hands could grab and pull into the mouth. Mommy's finger, for example. For the first time in a week, Adriana could relax for a while. The goiter came out pretty quickly. Betty looked very funny with one tooth. Adriana took a picture of her and sent the picture to her father. He responded by taking a picture of Adriana's baby picture in a scrapbook where she was a replica of Betty with one tooth sticking out of her mouth too. "Dad, I don't remember that." "How can you remember that? You were just a baby, always chewing on my finger with your songs. We used to give you a crust of bread to make it easier. Do you remember details like that?" Yes, my daughter. It was an interesting time in your life. Now you're an adult with children of your own. I feel like an old man. Like an old man. Daddy, you're the youngest daddy in the world. Thank you, daughter. I wish Mom could have seen Betty. She would have been so happy. Yeah, Adriana's sad. I wish Mommy could hold her granddaughter in her arms. Betty grew by leaps and bounds. Adriana took care of her with Ethan and the house. Ethan would occasionally come home drunk from work, but he swore and swore it was the last time. Adriana put up with it for the sake of the baby, who reached for her daddy's arms, rode happily on his neck, squealed with delight when Ethan tossed her up. Adriana was afraid he would drop her one day. He almost did, but Ethan picked the little girl up just in time. After that, Adriana forbade him from tossing Betty up. Betty grew up, and it was time for Adriana to go back to work. She applied to various organizations, called the Classifieds, went to the labor exchange. She found a job as an accountant at a manufacturing firm. Their accountant was going on maternity leave, and Adriana went temporarily in her place. But there was no choice. She had no work experience at all. She graduated from the technical school thanks to the fact that she was appreciated by her teachers. They turned a blind eye to some mistakes on exams and credits, and Adriana finished the technical school well. Betty had to be taken to a daycare center before she went to work so that she would adapt faster. On the first day, Adriana brought the girl for a couple hours. On the second day, Betty stayed until lunchtime, and so it went to a full day. Betty walked without much resistance. The educators said that she sleeps well in the afternoon. She eats almost everything too. It was safe for Adriana to go to work. She made up her mind and got a haircut. Not a bright manicure, bought new leather shoes and a skirt. Monday morning, the alarm clock rang. For Adriana, a new phase of life was beginning. Life went on as usual. Adriana worked, took Betty to daycare. Ethan disappeared at work and still drank in the evenings, though he swore every time that he would quit. Adriana silently tolerated everything, both her husband's absence at the right moments and his wild lifestyle. Until one day there was an incident that put an end to Adriana's family life. It was an ordinary weekday. Adriana took Betty to the daycare center, waved goodbye through the window, went to the bus stop, habitually got on the bus, and came to work. The working day passed a little nervously. They were preparing reports for statistics. I had to stay for half an hour. Adriana finished the last report. She put all the documents in a folder and took them to the chief accountant. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was the kindergarten teacher. "Hello," Betty fell and broke her lip. "There's a lot of blood. It's probably going to have to be stitched up." Adriana grabbed her jacket and ran out of the office. On the way, shouted that she was going to the hospital with the baby. Called a cab, and in 20 minutes was already at the daycare center. All the kids had already left. Betty was sitting on a bench and sobbed often. She covered her mouth with a handkerchief. Adriana ran up to her daughter and squatted down in front of her. "Daughter, does it hurt a lot?" Betty could only moo. Adriana transferred her daughter and hailed a cab. She told the driver to take her to the emergency room of the trauma ward. When they got there were a lot of people sitting there. Betty quietly sobbed and called for tears. She had no more strength. Finally, they were invited in by two young doctors in green suits and caps. They examined the wound. A young nurse prepared all the instruments. Adriana held her daughter's hands. When the baby was injected with anesthetic, she began to scream and burst out. Adriana used her last strength to calm her daughter, but it did not help much. Another nurse came to the rescue. While the stitches were in place, Adriana managed to mentally die several times. Betty's eyes swelled with tears. Suddenly, one of the doctors pulled a small doll with big eyes out of his pocket. Betty became silent and stared at it intently. The doctor put the dolly in Betty's palm and said, "You did good. The operation was very difficult. You were screaming, but you made it through. And that's why this doll goes to you. Thank you, doctor." Adriana didn't know how to thank him. She only now felt dead tired and wanted to sleep. Please take care of yourself. They walked out of the hospital building. They had to walk down a long alley to the road. They walked slowly and in silence. Betty was silently looking at the dolly. What did the doctor give her? She had already thought of a name for her, Zoya. So they reached the bus stop where Adriana hailed a cab. They sat in the back seat and charged each other. That's how they drove to the hostel. When they entered the room, they saw Ethan and two other men at the table. They were drinking and snacking on whatever they found in the fridge. Adriana burst into tears, and the new ones are eating out of here fast. You can't see the baby with the stitches. She's in pain and needs to rest. And you're here drinking vodka and smoking. Ethan, how could you even think of such a thing? You promised me you wouldn't drink anymore. I can't wear this anymore, she cried. Ethan stood up and swung a punch at Adriana. She swayed but did not fall. In response, Adriana lunged at him and started hitting his face, his shoulders, everything she could reach. A beastly rage awoke in her. Betty in the corner screamed, "Mommy, don't, Daddy, don't." The men, seeing what was wrong, stood up, grabbed Ethan, and sat her down. Adriana quickly put on her jacket, dressed Betty, grabbed her bag, and they ran out of the room. Already downstairs, Adriana stopped. Where to go at night? Commandant Kelly was on the spot. She looked out the door and was horrified. Adriana, Betty, what's the matter with you? Come in here at once. Oh, Kelly. Ethan led the men into our room. They were drinking, smoking. When I started to object, he hit me. Can you believe it? That bastard. That's one word for it. And he's a child abuser. He's completely brain dead. Where are you going to go? I don't know. I'll call my dad, but we're not welcome there, and there's no room. But they'll let us in for a while, until I find a place to live. I'm not letting you go to your father right now. You're not thinking of dragging a child out in the middle of the night. What happened to her lip? Yes, it did. We went to get stitches. Oh my God, my sweet girl. Kelly took Betty in her arms, put her on her lap, held her close and stroked her head and shoulders. What is Kelly doing to me? I don't know yet, but I can tell you this. If a man raises his hand on you once, he'll raise it a second time and a third, until he kills you. How many times have I seen that happen? Run away from him, girl. And run where? You can stay here for now. I've got plenty of room. I don't come here often. I've got another room. I'll put my papers there. Can you go get my stuff when he goes to work? I got a 12 o'clock. I've got towels, and I've got my green, and I've got my absorbent cotton, and I've got a stitch. Thank you, Kelly. You're so good. You're like my mom. I feel like a daughter to you too, don't I? My baby died when she was 2 from the effects of meningitis. Ever since then, I always look at girls her age as my daughter and see her in them. I'm sorry. When did you get over it? I worked nonstop, changed everyone, never took a day off until they forcibly kicked me out. Was it hard? Very hard. I cried into my pillow at night, mourning my little girl. God never gave me any more children. You're all like my babies. Kelly walked over to Adriana, hugged and kissed her cheek, stroked Betty's head, and went to her den. Here is the key, closes the whole thing. It's warm in here, and you mustn't be disturbed by anyone. I am usually found in the little den. Good night. Good night. The commandant went out with the magazine and the files. Adriana undressed Betty and put her on the bed. She sat down on the chair next to her, fought, undressed, and lay down. Sleep came quickly. This time she dreamed that she was riding on a high-speed train and the fields and towns rushed by. They were traveling together with Betty in a compartment where there was no one but them. The conductor brought 2 glasses of tea in metal cups, put them on the table next to each other, put 2 lumps of sugar and 2 teaspoons. The tea had lemon in it. Adriana took 2 tickets from the table and saw that they were going far away to the big city. Betty pushed Adriana in her sleep with her foot and she woke up. The dream did not continue. In the morning, Adriana called the head accountant and explained the situation. She gave her permission to take the day at her own expense because Adriana was the fastest to turn in the reports. Ethan should have gone to work by now. The woman looked at her sleeping daughter, went out and closed the door. She went up to her room and carefully opened the door with her key. Ethan was not in the room. Adriana quickly gathered all of her belongings, Betty, her own, carried into the room. The commandant then went upstairs once more and picked up the dishes. The room was a mess, bottles and cigarette butts lying around. There was encore in. Adriana opened the window and started to air it out. Then, remembering that she hadn't picked up her papers, she took out her marriage certificate and birth certificate. Betty put everything in a folder. Family life was over. After a little thought, Adriana took a piece of paper, sat down at her desk, and wrote Ethan a goodbye note notifying him that she could no longer live with him and that she was filing for divorce. Wrote that he could see him whenever he wanted, but only when he was sober himself. Folded the sheet and left it on the table. On her side of the house, Adriana was doing chores. Molly had to be fed. Betty was due to arrive soon. Michael came home glum. Adriana got worried. Is something wrong? Your face is gone. You look pale. I don't feel well. Let's rest up. You'll eat. I made you a nice dinner. I don't feel like eating. My stomach hurts a lot. Yesterday it hurt, and I noticed blood yesterday. I don't like it. Go see a doctor, please. I'll go to the doctor's office tomorrow. Whatever they say, I'll go there for sure. Betty arrived. She set down her bag, hugged Adriana, said hello to Michael, and went into the house where Molly immediately ran up to her. Betty started a game of hide and seek with her. Molly loved to hide, but she was always easy to find because there was always something sticking out. Betty would immediately become blind and could never find the girl. Molly would laugh and yell, "Here I am," and ran out of hiding. Betty, Molly, go get your supper already, girls. Adriana put food on a plate for the girls and sat down next to them and drank currant leaf tea. She liked their flavor very much. Mommy, I passed my exams. Good, you're my clever daughter. I never doubted you. You did well in school, and I didn't have to sit in class with you. You've been so focused and serious since you were a kid. All that's left is a diploma, and that's it. I'll finish this technical school. What are you planning to do next? I don't know yet. If I can't get in this year, I'll go to work, of course. You'll get in. You're smart. I'm smart too. Molly held her head up proudly. Of course you are. When Adriana and Molly came into the room, Michael was already asleep. Adriana lay quietly beside him and thought how much she loved him. She had never trusted anyone since Ethan, and it was a miracle that Michael had been able to melt her heart. With these thoughts, Adriana fell asleep. She had a dream in which she and Michael were walking through the meadow. Michael was holding her hand. They came to the bank of the river and looked at the other side. There were boats standing there. The bank was high and precipitous. Suddenly, the ground under Michael began to move, and he collapsed down. Adriana ran along the shore and tried to get down and help him, but it was in vain. The current there was swift and the river was deep. Michael was swept away, and she never saw him again. In horror, Adriana jumped up. Michael was here beside her, so near and dear. Adriana calmed down, lay down, and did not dream again until the morning. In the morning, Michael went to the clinic. He was given a list of examinations and tests that he had to undergo. He had time to take a general blood test, biochemistry, and do an electrocardiogram. All the week, Michael went to the offices and underwent the examination. He was frightened by the changes in his body. The doctor's verdict was disappointing. Colon cancer with metastasis to the lymph nodes. Michael didn't know how to tell Adriana. She was expecting their child, their son. He really wanted to hold his son in his arms, to go fishing with him, but apparently he wouldn't have to. The doctor said that with timely treatment, there's a 65–90% chance of survival, so he would try everything to be cured. Adriana was getting ready to pick up Molly at daycare. Michael walked into the house and silently made his way to the room. Adriana came out and went to get her daughter. Michael opened the oncologist's report one more time. Yes, that's what it was. Cancer. The prognosis was disappointing. It was devastating. Is this really it? He's still so young. Michael hoped the chemotherapy would help. Next week, he was to go to the oncology center. He'd be treated there. They would try to treat the tumor this way. Adriana and Molly came home from daycare. They met Betty outside and went into the house together. The mother-in-law was outside and gave them a look. Michael made dinner and set the table. My girls came to wash their hands at the table. I don't invite twice. In a flash, we all went to the bathroom to wash our hands. Molly was lax with Betty. Adriana was nudging them towards the table. Everyone was seated. Michael looked at everyone carefully, wanting to memorize their features. He couldn't believe that he didn't have much time left to live. Michael, you've been acting strange lately. What did the doctors say? Adriana, it's serious. It's bad. I have cancer. They're gonna have to do an MRI in stage 2 or 3 to confirm the diagnosis. And I've already been scheduled for chemotherapy. Michael Adriana didn't know what to say or how to find the words. The ground was once again falling away from under her feet. Could it still be okay? There are treatments, aren't there? They didn't tell me anything. I'm going to the oncology center for treatment in a week. Then they'll do an MRI, and then they'll decide my fate. Jesus, where did this thing come from? You were fine. Yeah, I had a stomachache once in a while, but who doesn't? What can I do for you right now? Adriana's heart was breaking in pain. Only she had built a happy family life, as a terrible disease takes away her beloved husband. Girls, let's not be sad. We're all around each other now, and I love you all, and we love you. Molly and Betty looked at him. We're going to get through this. I believe that too. Otherwise, what kind of head of household would I be? I will definitely wait until my son is born and rock his cradle. Of course, honey, of course. Adriana could hardly hold back her tears. A week later, Michael packed his things and went to the hospital. He told her not to visit him until he called her. Adriana was very upset, but decided to be strong and focused, no matter what. Michael and the kids need her. She would not give up. Every day they had long conversations with Michael. Sometimes he would say he was in for treatments and ask her not to call him for a few hours because he was nauseous. Adriana had broken through to visit him several times, but he wouldn't allow it. He didn't want his wife to see him weak. He really wanted to beat the disease and do everything to do so. The course of chemotherapy had already lasted a month. After it, Michael had a magnetic resonance imaging study. He was found to have metastases in the bladder, prostate gland, and lymph nodes. Doctors suggested surgery. Adriana lost weight, became like a shadow. She moved mechanically, did her job, took care of the children. But her thoughts were with Michael. He gave her permission to come, and she rushed to him. On leaving work, Michael looked exhausted. All his hair had fallen out. He was often nauseous, although all the necessary medications were prescribed. A catheter was secured in one arm. The tubing from it guided the IVs. Adriana took Michael's other arm in her hand, was sluggish and lifeless. There wasn't much left of the old Michael, only his eyes. Adriana loved looking into his eyes and seeing her reflection in them. She sat in silence and prayed fervently. The doctor came in and asked Adriana to leave the room. They are about to perform procedures. I will write to you when I can write. Michael's voice sounded quiet. Goodbye, sweetheart. Adriana tried to walk calmly out the door, but as soon as she got out, she cried. She tried to hold back, but she was not succeeding well. She got dressed and went outside, let her feelings come out and screamed. The tension was too high. There were trees all around, rare people passing in the distance. Everything went on as it was. People were born and died. There was nothing new. The moon looked at her indifferently from the sky. and I won't give it to you, old woman with a scythe." Adriana stopped suddenly. Her tears had dried. She was overwhelmed with determination. She quickly walked towards the road, and there caught a cab. Already in the cab, she started reading articles about this type of cancer. The more she read, the more her hope for Michael's recovery melted away. She arrived home already broken and with a heavy heart. Michael was not released from the hospital, and the doctors continued to prepare him for surgery. The surgery was a success. The rehabilitation process was already underway. Michael was beginning to feel better. Adriana asked everyone she knew to pray for Michael. She herself went to church and put candles in the candles. She didn't know how else she could help him. Her mother-in-law would come and take Molly to her house. She got old and stopped. She was worried about her son too. She didn't say anything to her daughter-in-law. She came silently and left silently. Molly did not like to go to her grandmother, but the latter lured her with new toys and books. The girl was afraid to offend her grandmother and played at her place for a while. Then she said she wanted to go to her mom. The mother-in-law would take Molly by the hand and lead her to her sister-in-law. Betty supported her mother as best she could. She stayed with Molly. When Adriana went to the hospital, she cleaned the house, did the dishes, went grocery shopping. She tried not to cross paths with her mother-in-law, and when she met her mother-in-law on the street, she politely said hello and went on without stopping. My mother-in-law never stopped, only grumbled and followed. Tied around my son's neck, bloodied his leg. It was December and he seemed to be on the mend. The doctors continued chemotherapy. Adriana traveled to see him every day like she was going to work. At work, she was released unconditionally because she was a good worker. She did things well and on time. If necessary, she could substitute for the accountants in any area. That day, she was making out the results of the inventory when the phone call from the city number sounded. "Adriana, this is the doctor on duty at the 2nd ward of the cancer center. I'd like to inform you that your husband Michael passed away at 2:20 p.m. I'm so sorry for your loss. You can come and get a death certificate." "Yes, I will." Adriana answered mechanically, like a robot. She sank down on a chair from around the corner. From all sides, female employees came to her to comfort her. One employee was told by the chief accountant to escort Adriana to the hospital and asked the driver to take her. "Adriana, I ordered that now you girls will get material aid from the cash register. Only write a statement later. Such grief, girl. Thank you." Adriana sat with puffy eyes and could not believe what was happening. Then everything was like a fog. Hospital, certificate, registry office, receiving burial allowance. Ritual agencies agreed that the funeral would be the next day at 14 o'clock. A farewell to the body in the memorial hall was opened from 12 to 2. Adriana walked into the house, tired and hungry. Betty poured her some hot soup. Molly put her arms around her neck. Adriana had no energy for anything. Her stomach was pulling. She lay down on the bed and immediately fell into a deep sleep. Her mother-in-law did not leave her side of the house to visit them. The next day, Adriana came out of the house pale and without a shadow of blush on her face. On her head, she tied a black lace scarf. She took a cab to the memorial hall, entered and saw her beloved lying in the coffin. He was so pale and so calm. Adriana walked over and put her hand on his, and her hand was ice cold. "You are far away from me now, and you won't be tortured anymore." Adriana's eyes were dry, all her tears. She had cried the day before, her stomach pulling hard. From the pain, Adriana couldn't stand for long and sat down on the bench next to her. Michael was approached by friends and relatives. Her mother-in-law wailed near the coffin how the blood of her saint lived. Adriana listened to it all aloofly. When it was time to go to the cemetery, she sat quietly on the bench near the coffin and remained silent the whole way. When the hearse stopped, Adriana got out and saw the open hole of the grave and the cross beside it. The movers carried the casket out and placed it on a special stand for those who didn't have time to say goodbye. She kissed Michael on the forehead and stepped back. The coffin was lowered into the grave, her happy family life being lowered into the grave along with it. Adriana suddenly felt sick. Something hot was pouring down her legs. She went into labor and screamed. Her mother-in-law suddenly woke up, looked at Adriana with hatred, and shouted that you and your children should not be in my house. Find another place to live tomorrow. Adriana had already called an ambulance. It took her to the maternity hospital where she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. He was so much like Michael. In the future, the fate of Adriana and her children turned out well. She moved away from her mother-in-law to a small town where the authorities gave her rented accommodation. Adriana took up her favorite hobby of candle making and created her own brand Warmth of Your Soul. Orders came in from all over the world. There was plenty of money to go around. Her daughters and son lived with her. But before that, the situation was quite dramatic. Adriana had returned from the maternity hospital to her half of the house with her young son and wanted nothing more than quiet and warmth. Betty helped her get home and prepared everything to welcome the new family member. Adriana and the late Michael wanted to name their son William. That is how she registered the boy. Dimitri. Betty babysat William, and Adriana went to process the birth certificate. It was extremely lonely and difficult for Adriana. Even though there were 3 children at home, everything in her chest ached with grief and a sense of loss, as if a part of her had been taken away. Looking at little William, she saw Michael. She remembered how he dreamed of taking his son in his arms and spent hours sobbing into her pillow, sitting at night by her little son's crib. Her mother-in-law came to her room in the morning, tried to talk to her about something, but Adriana politely escorted her away, saying, "William, it's time to eat," and so on. Adriana needed time to recover from the labor and recover a little. She didn't have the strength to fight with her mother-in-law, to defend herself against her attacks. She missed her husband so much, she wanted to hide behind him, to be snowy and weak. But the mother-in-law was not going to stop. This time she came into Adriana's room and demanded that she put candles in front of the portrait and around the room so that Michael's soul could stay with us. Why so many candles? One is enough. So you want the memory of my dead son. Just because I don't put candles all over the house doesn't mean I don't love or remember Michael. And then there's the leftover smell of candles. Little William was starting to have a bad cough. The baby was turning red and choking. The mother-in-law wouldn't stop. "I guess you're eating the wrong things, trying the wrong things. Seeing that the baby has a cough at all. Have you started it?" How many times Adriana tried to oppose her and explain the cause of the cough, to ask her to remove the candles. But all the requests had no effect on her mother-in-law. She did not consider Adriana as a full member of the family. One morning, while Adriana was on her way to a doctor's appointment, the mother-in-law lit many candles in Adriana's room and left. Little William was lying in the crib. He began to cough and gasp violently. At that time, the flame of one candle spread to the curtains, and they caught fire. Where did they go? The acrid smoke spread through the room. Good thing Betty was home in the kitchen at the time, making dinner. She rushed her half Adriana and jumped into the room, quickly grabbed the baby out of the crib and ran out. Neighbors ran up and quickly doused the resulting fire. When Adriana returned home, she was greeted by a cold, damp, smoke-ravaged room and a gasping William. She cleaned the room, ventilated it, removed all the candles and smoke-missing bedspreads. Strictly forbade her mother-in-law to light any candles in front of William. You can only burn them in your room. It's not good for William to inhale their smoke. He may die from his father's wreaths. You don't love my son, and William has nothing to do with it, the woman replied. However, it was necessary to call an ambulance to the child, injected with antihistamines, because the nasopharynx began to swell. William soon fell asleep. This is how the confrontation between the mother-in-law and Adriana lasted. The father-in-law did not interfere, preferring to keep neutral. But then Michael's brother intervened. It turns out that he has nowhere to live. and he and his family soon plans to move here on Adriana's half. He and Michael did not have time to register the building, and it turned out that Adriana was on the street. William was already 6 months old. It was summer outside. Adriana packed all the things she planned to take with her, ordered a truck, and the whole family drove to a small town to Adriana's sister's house. The woman agreed to shelter the family until Adriana found a place to live. The woman went to the local administration and explained the situation, saying that she had been kicked out of her home with her children. The local head promised her rented accommodation, and in the future she would be able to put her children in a kindergarten. A month later, the housing was provided. Adriana and her sister went to see the apartment. It was quite tolerable. Just wallpaper, paint the windows, and the three of them could move in with her sister and her husband. They quickly made a small repair, and now it was time to take things apart in the new place. There were 3 small rooms in the apartment. The girls were in one, Adriana was in one with William in another, and the third was like a living room. The furniture, of course, was not enough, but it did not embarrass them. Gradually, the neighbors began to give their still good furniture. So Adriana and her children got a closet and a kitchen table. Stools and beds had to be bought in installments. Life was getting better. Betty became quite grown up and independent. She was already working and bringing home a paycheck. Adriana would take a little for groceries and leave the rest to Betty. One day, Betty introduced Adriana to her fiancé, Sam. They planned to get married in the fall, when the work on the cottage, which was Sam's father's, was finished. He was a widower, lived at the cottage in the summer, and traveled from there to work. The apartment was left to the young. Adriana met Jack when they came to matchmaking. It was easy for her to communicate with him. There were many common topics of conversation and shared interests. Soon his father proposed to Adriana.